Welcome to the 6th Annual Giving USA Briefing, sponsored by Lighthouse Counsel, a member firm of the Giving Institute. Today we explore the Giving USA 2026 findings on 2025 giving and what they mean for mission-driven leaders. Leading our opening overview is Dr. Lilya Wagner of Lighthouse Counsel. For more than 3 decades, she's been one of the nonprofit sector's leading authors, speakers, trainers, coaches, and practitioners. She is a longtime faculty member of the Fundraising School, former Associate Director for Public Service, and Director of the Women's Philanthropy Institute at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and the first 2-time recipient of the AFP Skystone Partners Prize for Research on Fundraising and Philanthropy. Now, here's Dr. Wagner to walk us through this year's findings.
Thank you and welcome. I'm delighted to be with you for Lighthouse Counsel's 6th Annual Giving USA Briefing. Let me begin with the headline because it is a hopeful one. In 2025, Americans gave more to charity than in any year in our nation's history. Total giving reached an estimated $617.20 billion. For the first time, the United States crossed the $600 billion mark. This is more than a number. It is a sign of resilience, generosity, and commitment across the country to our wonderful nonprofit organizations. So what is Giving USA? Before we move to the findings, let me briefly describe where these numbers come from. Giving USA is the longest running and most comprehensive report on charitable giving in America. This year marks 70 years of Giving USA. It estimates where money comes from, where it went, and how those patterns are changing over time. It is published by the Giving USA Foundation, a public service initiative of the Giving Institute, and is researched and written by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, where I worked for quite a few years and am still friends with. This matters because the panel is not just reacting to anecdotes. We will be working from the best national benchmark we have, based on research and also successful experience. So let us begin with the top line. Total charitable giving in the United States, as we mentioned, reached $617.20 billion in 2025. That is up 5.7% in current dollars over the prior year, and certainly good news. Even after adjusting for inflation, giving grew 3.0%. That makes 2025 the second highest year ever in inflation-adjusted terms. Only 2021 remains higher after inflation. This is a celebration moment for sure. Nonprofit leaders do not always get easy headlines. Costs are up, needs are complex, and trust is hard-won. And yet, Americans gave at record levels. Now, generosity rose against a complicated backdrop. The context makes the numbers even more striking. The stock market was strong, and that matters because giving is closely tied to asset values. Strong markets helped lift giving by individuals, foundations, and corporations. At the same time, people were anxious. Consumer confidence reached a 60-year low. Many households were worried about the economy and their own financial security. And still, generosity rose. That tells us something important. Generosity is not only a fair-weather habit, it is more durable than that. For roughly 40 years, total giving has hovered around 2% of the nation's economy. Through booms, recessions, and uncertainty, giving has remained a remarkably steady part of American life. And I can speak from experience because I was a refugee child, and it was American generosity that helped us get established in this country. So that's one reason I have always been inspired by the giving and also this report. So where do the dollars come from? There are 4 sources that we can look at, and all 4 increased in current dollars in 2025. Individuals still gave the most by far, an estimated $394.20 billion, about 64 cents of every charitable dollar. Foundations gave $117.15 billion and have now topped the $100 billion mark every year since 2022. Bequests reached $62.19 billion, rising nearly 20% and becoming the fastest growing source this year. Corporations gave $43.67 billion. Corporate growth was modest this year, but over 5 years, corporate giving is up 60%. The important point is that the sources are all moving, but they're not moving in the same way. Strategy has to reflect that. Individuals still carry American giving, which is of course a very significant factor, since I'm sure many of us have heard, well, just go and ask the business if they've got the money. So this slide, while it's quite simple, is really strategically important. Individuals remain the foundation of American charity and generosity. Even when we talk about foundations, donor advised funds, family offices, bequests, and corporate giving, philanthropy is still deeply personal. People make decisions. People choose trust. People respond to meaning, clarity, relationships, and timing. That is why the participation question matters. The total dollars are strong, but leaders should pay close attention to who is participating, who is drifting away, and who is waiting for a clearer reason to stay. Now to a headline within the headline. Giving through wills and estates increased 19.7% in 1 year, reaching $62.19 billion. Part of that was anchored by one extraordinary gift, a $3.1 billion bequest from the late Paul Allen. We should also be careful. Bequest giving can move unevenly from year to year, so 1 year never tells the full story. But this is bigger than 1 year. Bequests have now grown 20% or more in 3 of the last 4 years. This is a signal that leaders should take seriously. We may be seeing the leading edge of the great wealth transfer that we've heard about so much, or at least a preview of what happens when estate values, donor relations, and legacy intentions meet. For CEOs and development leaders, the question is practical. Are you helping loyal donors think about legacy, beneficiary designations, retirement assets, QCDs, and planned gifts? If not, this is definitely the year to begin. One interesting factor, and here's an honest note, the growth we saw in 2025 was powered in a meaningful part by very large gifts. Mega gifts from living individuals totaled about $19.22 billion. Those gifts matter. They can change institutions. They can accelerate work that might otherwise take decades. We celebrate them. But underneath the record total, the number of everyday donors has been shrinking for years. More dollars from fewer people. That is the quiet challenge for this moment. This is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to focus. The organizations that thrive will not only chase the next mega gift, they will treat every donor as a relationship, not a transaction. They will make impact visible and easy to understand. They will steward mid-level donors as faithfully as major donors. They will invite first-time and crisis donors to stay and belong. So we're looking at where the money went. A quick word about that. 8 of the 9 types of recipient organizations saw giving increase in current dollars. Education grew 11.7%. Public society benefit grew 11.6%. Environment and animals grew 11%. Human services, health, arts and culture, international affairs, and religion all grew in current dollars. A detail from the Giving USA infographic is worth naming. 5 subsectors reached all-time highs even after adjusting for inflation. Human services, education, health, arts, culture and humanities, and environment and animals. Religion remains the largest recipient category at about $152 billion, though it was essentially flat after inflation. The one category that declined was giving to foundations, following a record 2024 and still remaining historically high. The right conclusion is not that every organization had an easy year. The right conclusion is that the national environment remains strong, while individual results depended heavily on relevance, relationship, visibility, and trust. So what should we carry into the panel? First, generosity is strong. After an anxious economic year, total giving reached a record current dollar high. That is definitely worth celebrating. Second, how people give is changing. Legacy gifts, donor-advised funds, QCDs, appreciated assets, foundations, and larger gifts from fewer donors are becoming more central to the conversation. Annual giving still matters deeply, but it cannot be the whole strategy. Third, leaders decide what happens next. Giving USA gives us a weather report. It tells us what is happening nationally, but leaders decide whether their organizations are dressed for the weather. The numbers do not fundraise, people do. And as a professional for many years, I can attest to the fact that the figures, the knowledge that is imparted by Giving USA is very significant on how we plan and carry out our fundraising plan and our outreach on behalf of our organizations. Very valuable information. Let me stop there because this is exactly the right moment to bring in the panel. My colleague, John O'Kane, will help us move from the national picture to the practical choices nonprofit leaders face in boardrooms, donor conversations, and strategic planning. John is Professor of Practice Emeritus in Public Management and Policy at Georgia State University's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies. Over more than 5 decades, he has worked with hundreds of nonprofit organizations as a staff leader, executive director, consultant, volunteer, board member, professor, and advisor. John, over to you, and thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner, for that excellent overview of the Giving USA 2026 report. And thank you, Lila, for the leadership and distinguished service that you've provided to the nonprofit sector over the years, especially with your time at the IU Family School of Philanthropy. With that, I'd like to welcome a most distinguished panel that we have today to look at the results of Giving USA 2026. I will introduce them just briefly because I think we want to get right into the content of what we're doing. First of all is Harvey Green, who is a veteran healthcare advancement executive, most recently with WellSpan Health Philanthropy. Welcome, Harvey. Veronica Squires is the Chief Philanthropy Officer at the YMCA of Metro Atlanta. Welcome, Veronica. She is surviving the World Cup in Atlanta, so we appreciate that. Jill Walton. Jill Walton is the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at the University of Georgia. Welcome, Jill. And last but certainly not least, Derek Willard, who is head of school with Ravenscroft in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for agreeing to take time to be with us today. Let me pose the first question to you, which is sort of a general one, and that is, we saw that the total giving in 2025 was reported at a little over $617 billion. I am mostly going to refer to adjusted for inflation dollars rather than gross because that's what we have to work with. That number was a 3% inflation adjusted increase from the previous year. It was the second highest year on record next to 2021, which was our COVID year, as you know. So the first thing I want to pose is what was the one kind of biggest takeaway from 2025 that you might share? And Jill, could you start us off?
Yeah, I would assume that this is probably very similar to what others are experiencing, but at the University of Georgia, we saw bigger gifts from fewer donors. So our dollars, our overall fundraising dollars were up, but our donor count was down. Great that the dollars are up, making a bigger impact on campus, but concerning that we're not growing that donor pipeline for the future. So we saw more principal gifts for us. That is right now $1 million or more principal gifts than we ever have before. That contributed a greater percentage of our overall total fundraising number for the year. We actually just closed our fiscal year yesterday, and we're continuing to see these same trends. Just a couple other things I'll mention, John, before I toss it. I think overall seeing more, mega gifts from the ultra wealthy across the nation, more donor advised funds and our donors giving from those as well. And then just this general theme from our donors is they don't want to just write a check, they want to see impact and be involved. So that was more than one, but biggest takeaway is greater dollars, fewer donors, and I would assume that's pretty consistent.
I think we're going to see that be a recurring theme, and we'll probably drill down into that a little bit more as we move through. I want to go to Veronica because, Veronica, I think that the Y may actually have more of a broader donor base when you look at, the wealth that people have. What was your biggest takeaway in 2025?
Yes, we do have a broad donor base because in addition to external donors, many of our members, YMCA members, are donors. But I would echo what Jill shared, that we did see a number of larger donors give bigger gifts at the end of the year, actually in response to some of the upcoming tax code changes. There was some year-end bunching of multi-year gifts, people going ahead and giving the cash at the end of 2025 for their 25, 26, 27 pledges, or making a pledge and going ahead and paying it. The other thing that I think may have influenced the numbers in 2025 was private philanthropy really stepped up in a few of the moments related to the government shutdown, and specifically two areas where the Y saw an impact were in food access and distribution when SNAP was at risk for many families, and then in early learning when there was the concern about Head Start not being included in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So I think that may also have impacted this increase in 2025.
Interesting. Derek, you may be used to working with maybe a little bit of a different donor base. What did you see in 2025?
Well, so it was a record year for us overall. We actually saw total giving up 20%, and we had our parent body participation, which is really the bulk of our gifts, go up 10%. And so To your point, we're on a smaller scale maybe than the University of Georgia or the Y. Independent schools in general are a unique space, small scale, rather captive audience. We might extend reach into grandparents and alumni like Georgia, okay, university systems. But by and large, a lot of this is our present base. And I think our biggest lesson from that, our biggest takeaway, is that we really believe if there's a compelling message, if there's a compelling vision, a demonstrated need, and then we show progress, demonstrated progress towards that need, that our donors respond. And this is the second year in a row we've seen that. I can't say we've seen, big gifts right now over $1 million, but we're also not in a capital campaign. So it would be unusual for an independent school probably to see $1 million gift in a year unless it was a capital campaign.
Yeah, very good. Now, Harvey, you may be used to working with a little bit of a different donor base in the healthcare field. Tell us what you saw in 2025.
Absolutely, John. And I echo my colleagues in their comments of seeing some of the more transformational gifts at the top, while we're seeing the volume of gifts decline. But to me, as some of you may know, the healthcare industry in general is going through a lot of consolidation and acquisition. And so on the other side of it, when you think about donors such as grateful patients and community members, they too are consolidating their giving. They are donating and supporting institutions that they know and trust, as opposed to dispersing dollars to multiple institutions on the smaller level. What we're finding is donors are really focused in on organizations that resonate most strongly with their personal missions. And so we're seeing this big influx of mega gifts because folks are indicating that they have a significant amount of trust, respect, and believe in everything these organizations are doing within their community to affect change with respect to healthcare. And so some of the same trends that we're seeing across, health and human services, higher education, and healthcare, folks are really making significant, pledges, estate gifts, really on the hopes of ensuring this future of this country in the way of how we deliver healthcare, how we educate students, and how we go about caring for our community with respect to health equity and access. And so I'm not surprised that the number continues to go up. Folks are wealthier than ever. When you think about the K-shaped economy of folks who are doing really well at the top, the middle is shrinking as we see. And these folks are really expressing their ideas of making an impact on these very critical areas as far as healthcare, education, and health and human services.
Yeah, I think there's a real trend that each of you are talking about where the size of those gifts have increased. At the same time, we've sort of seen individual giving in Giving USA go down, where it was only 1.4% of adjusted inflation, with money coming from other sources. But I wonder, what about the impact of the changes with the One Big Beautiful Bill, as it's called, and the tax exempt things? Veronica mentioned the bunching, but do you see those tax changes impacting? I want to focus on that middle group, because I was touched with Veronica when she said that people stepped up about SNAP and when there was a real need with the child care. But it seems that as we rock along, the gifts have stayed, again, much higher. So do we think that whole issue of tax exemption is going to impact your donations? And let me start with Veronica on that, and I'll go around.
I absolutely do think it's going to impact donations. And when we learned about the upcoming tax changes in the middle of last year, we actually took a proactive approach and sent a letter to our larger donors. And we really took more of a trusted advisor posture, so that it was not a strong ask. It was a letter from me. It went to a number of our folks and it said, you may have heard about the upcoming changes tax code changes. In case you haven't, here's what they are, and we outlined the specifics and said now is a good time to start thinking about causes you care about. We kind of left it open to any cause you care about. And specifically at the why, here are some areas of need for us. So it was not a hard ask, it was more informational. And we saw a lot of impact from that. We had major donors that took our letter to their financial advisor and said, is this true? Verifying that we were correct about the tax code changes. And if so, I'd like to give through my donor advised fund to the Y. So last year, we were really focused on those larger donors because the tax code changes impacted them most first. This year, we're going to be more focused on smaller and mid-level donors because the tax code changes impacts them more in 2026. So I absolutely think we've been responsive to it and have seen good results.
Very good, very good. Jill, any comments there? You kind of mentioned it before, but
No, and I would echo exactly what Veronica said. We did similar outreach. Again, not a hard ask, but an advice, and wanted to make them aware. So we did something very similar. I'll mention one thing that we have been talking about a lot with the One Big Beautiful Bill, not related to the all of the tax laws and changes, but we've been able to talk about some of the changes with the student loan program, some of the changes there that came for undergrad students and for graduate students. There were some caps that were placed on the federal loans that students can take out. We've actually been able to talk about that a lot in our campaign for scholarship support. And that's really resonated with a number of our donors. We are we continue to be in a need-based scholarship campaign. That has been a priority for our president over his 13 years as president of the University of Georgia. So I do think that's one thing that we've been able to use from the bill to educate donors and encourage more giving to scholarships. I probably have a few more comments on donor advised funds but you may have a question about that in just a little bit.
We'll come back to that later. Harvey, your comment about the impact of maybe the tax exempt changes.
Yeah, I echo Jill's sentiment because, I work in the medical education space and the same thing with the federal loan process. And so we've had an influx of donors who really want to give to scholarships. Medical students graduate sometimes upwards 200, 300, even 400,000 in medical school debt. And sometimes that may or may not include their undergraduate debt. And so one of the things that we were focused on is figuring out how to mitigate that challenge, because we know we're going to have a shortage of nurses and doctors in the next 10, 20 years. And so that has been an important component for us. Sure, we have had targeted mailings regarding the tax code changes, but really what I'm noticing, John, is that folks are really understanding that philanthropy is a strategic accelerator. So given the tax code and the tax changes, which the pendulum shifts back and forth, we try not to play too much into that because that makes it seem a bit transactional, in which we really focus in on our mission. And what we're finding is that folks want to be a part of something special. Sure, you're going to always have to be reminded and be mindful of the tax code changes. But we want to keep our narrative concise, cohesive, and really have our case support speak to the impact that we're having. Because if folks really want to give and make a difference, they're going to do so.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point.
Yeah. When you think about the mid and maybe some of the smaller level gifts, perhaps that comes more into play. But we don't let the tax code deter our mission. And we don't talk about it in our conversations. We know it exists, so we're not blindly going into conversations. But we try to focus on how folks can have the most impact.
Yeah. Derek, your thoughts your thoughts on this?
Well, we haven't really used that as a strategy, and I can't say we've attributed our success this year to the One Big Beautiful Bill tax changes right now. So, of course, it's something we're going to keep our eyes attuned to. And again, if we shift into a much larger campaign mode, it may have more of an impact and be more of a strategy for us.
I think the point that each of you have made so far a couple of times It's about the mission, it's about the goal, and I think it's about the uniqueness that philanthropy can raise given what the need or the opportunity is out there. And I think we see that sometimes, especially with disasters or other things like that. Throw away whatever the tax code. We're here, we're going to help. And that certainly has been something, it may be unfair to say it's uniquely American, but it certainly is built into our culture. But I want to stay with the fact that we have fewer folks giving larger money because I think the one big takeaway from this Giving USA 2026 for me was that almost the bequest increased by 16.6% when adjusted for inflation. And 3 out of the last 4 years, that share of bequest income in charity has increased. And so it seems like we've been talking, I think, for 10 or 15 years about the great transfer of wealth. And when I was working, I was waiting for it, but I didn't see it. But it looks like it's coming now. So I'd be curious for you to comment on that notion of bequest or legacy gifts. And not only what you are doing, but I think a big issue for a number of nonprofits, especially if they're not particularly large, is how do we staff that or how do we go about trying to secure that? Veronica, would you start us off?
Sure. I think having been in philanthropy for a couple decades, planned giving has really increased as a topic in the conversation. I think in the past it was really just forward thinking development professionals who were thinking about the person that was going to be in their role after them and the person after that, and really trying to build that future sustainability. Now it's a topic of conversation more frequently. And the way it's staffed at the YMCA, I have a vice president of individual and plan giving who's responsible for the annual campaign, helping with special events, as well as plan giving. So it's a designated part of her title and scope of work. One of the things that, and Courtney Severson is the person I'm referring to, my vice president. One of the things that she has leveraged in such a smart way is a platform called Free Will, which allows you to set up one, it's a free will service where we can offer that as a benefit to donors and members as a way to just engage them, help them set up a free will. But then as they walk through the prompts, it invites them to name the why in their will as they're walking through that process. We have been very pleasantly surprised that many people who were not even on our radar as donors started that, like, their first gift to us is naming us at a small level in their will as a result of offering this as a member donor benefit. The other thing is we've had many, as an old organization, we're more than 165 years old in Atlanta. We have these historical endowments that were set up years and years and years ago, and it was sort of a set it and forget it. Courtney's done a great job of doing some proactive stewardship, of reaching back out to the families that are still connected to these endowments and just sharing updates and letting them know this is what's happened. Over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've used your money in these ways for these programs, and it's made a big impact. So even thinking about stewardship as it relates to planned giving. But I can't say enough good things about the free will service. It makes it very easy, especially if you're on a short staff, donors can recommend gifts through their DAFs on that platform. Again, I mentioned people can create their own will and then name you in that process. And it does help development professionals go further faster as it relates to plan giving.
Very good. I'd like to go to Derek, because I think some challenges with K through 12 education is getting those bequests, because Jill's the one who steals all of them at the University of Georgia or Harvard at some distinguished, medical facilities. So I wonder, could you comment on that?
Absolutely. So again, the majority of our donors are our current families. And so it's not a big strategy for us. I'd say it's certainly an area of growth given the trend with this transfer of wealth. I would say grandparents for us are more likely to gift tuition. And so, that's an immediate impact they can see for their child. But in some of our longest, multi-generational families, They usually come to us and say, this has been so important, in our family, we want to leave a legacy, and we'll do that. So for us, not as big an impact right now, but I would say certainly in an area we want to continue to explore and staff better.
Yeah, very good. Jill, I'm sure there's a big emphasis here and a big opportunity for Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derek, I would tell you my own kid's private school has begun more in this effort as well. So happy to connect there. But absolutely, planned giving we have seen a tremendous increase in even just the last 3 years, a 40% increase in planned giving to the University of Georgia. We have a pretty small planned giving team, a team of attorneys who speak the legal language and understand all the laws and the tax codes. But we also really train all of our development officers across campus to be well versed in planned giving. So our planned giving team really acts as a consultant to our major gift officers, and they come in, they're assigned to different schools and colleges and work with them. But we feel like all of our fundraisers should be able to talk about planned giving. We're doing a lot more connection between our planned giving office and our principal gift team, our newer principal gift team, discussing more blended gifts, sharing with donors that there are opportunities to make a bigger impact with a cash commitment and perhaps a planned gift. It allows us to think bigger and dream bigger with our donors when we can provide some of these gift vehicles and options. Planned giving this year is going to represent, or in the last year, about 20% of our overall fundraising. I think at most universities, kind of that industry standard is probably more 25 to 30%. So we feel like we have a lot of growth in that arena as well. And then on the transfer of wealth topic, I will mention one other thing that we are increasingly focused on is young philanthropists, children of wealth that we have identified. We know of our larger donors who will be accumulating a lot of this wealth over the next 20, 30 years. And we are starting to track, to keep them engaged, to get them involved with our boards and opportunities for engagement and support, across campus. And we're starting to see some good results and benefits from that as well. So this won't help us right now, but in the future, thinking about those young philanthropists who will be our largest philanthropists.
Good. Harvey, you mentioned, as we look ahead to the shortage of doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals, it seems like that would present an opportunity in talking about planned or deferred gifts. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I love this topic, and I have a quick story. Both Jill, Veronica, Derek, and I, and John, I know in your fundraising career, I think we all clearly acknowledge that we stand upon the shoulders of folks who came before us. And so while we would love to think that we can show up and all of a sudden close a $10 million gift and that our presence in of itself did that, I know none of us are of that thinking. And so the influx and this great transfer of wealth is coinciding with this idea of this lifelong stewardship and engagement of folks within our organizations. So now we are the recipients of this. Sure, the transfer of wealth is happening, but it's happening also in conjunction with this long cultivation and stewardship process that our donors have been receiving for years on end. We've had a donor who had been given for 32 years straight, $100 and $200 and $300 gifts. This person passed and left their estate, and it ended up being nearly $9 million.
There you go. Yeah.
And that is what I'm talking about. This is indicative of this process of stewardship and trust that our institutions have built over the years. And we are grateful to be in a position to reap the benefits of this transfer of wealth. And so we are seeing it very strongly in healthcare. We are ramping up our planned giving expertise and staff. And as Jill mentioned, make sure our gift officers are having more of a comprehensive conversation regarding planned giving, because we know that this is going to be the game changer for us. And yes, John, to your question, with respect to scholarships and recipients, folks who need to be the future healthcare professionals, folks are really in tune to figuring out how can I be a part of helping to build that future legacy.
Well, and you make a good point about the 32-year donor giving $100, $200. That's that middle donor. And if we neglect looking at that and looking at ways to bring them along, I think it's only been actually maybe in the last 10 or 15 years where I've seen nonprofits recognize donors who've given consistently, even though it may only be a small amount. And that was very, very smart because you never know what else is there. And so I think that's a challenge for all of us, not to ignore and match our mission with those who may be giving at a steady or having a presence there for us. So thank you about that. I got two other topics I want to move on because I think it's going to shift the conversation a little bit here. And that is that 19% of the gifts given last year came from foundations. And even with a strong economy, it was really only a 1.4% increase in foundations. And I'm thinking in my mind that are we seeing a leveling off of the traditional foundations because donors do now have other options with DAFs, with their qualified charitable distributions, and wealthier families have other options too. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you're doing as you approach traditional foundations. Let me start with Jill. Why don't you start us off on that?
Yeah, John, I would say we're pretty flat in foundation giving. I mean, there's some spikes as I look back over the years. It may have been when we were in a capital, a campaign for a new building. Sometimes, foundations can be drawn to that, but we're not seeing big increases either. We also have a pretty small foundation relations team. I think foundations are, maybe a bit more cautious. Some of them we see and we are working with are spending down, and so there are opportunities maybe for some bigger. But it seems like they're narrowing their focus and becoming it's a little more difficult. So we have not seen huge growth there. I don't know that I can add much more. And I come out of corporate and foundation relations. So that was a big part of my role here in starting our team at UGA. But I'm curious what others are seeing. We've got our consistent ones that we, go back to every few years if there's an opportunity that presents itself. But we're not seeing big growth there. Yeah. What about others?
Yeah, well, Veronica, I know that looking at over the years with the Metropolitan Atlanta Y, local foundations have played a huge role in the growth and development. But what are you seeing now?
Yes, I think that's still holding true for the Y, thankfully, but the giving behavior, while the dollars are staying largely flat for foundations, the giving behavior is shifting for traditional foundations and corporate foundations, where they're narrowing the number of organizations that they're working with and giving larger and sometimes multi-year commitments. And I'll give you one example. So there's a local Atlanta foundation that has typically for years been, for us, a max 25K ask. And we go through the process, we submit the proposal. This year, ahead of the proposal, we had our normal, we sit down, we talk about their priorities, our priorities, and we pitched a bigger vision where we want them to really own a programmatic pillar area. We talked about some of the outcomes that we could achieve with a 3-year partnership and pitched a $250,000 ask. We literally added a zero, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, but we're moving through the process. So I think that's sort of a shift from a $25,000 ask to a $250,000 would not have been possible years ago, but I think is more possible now because foundations are realizing that the peanut butter spread approach is not the path to seeing this society and systemic impact that they want to see.
Yeah, Harvey, what are you seeing with the foundations?
Yeah, I worry about foundation giving, and a couple reasons why. Number one, they all have, as Jill alluded to earlier, they all have these spending policies. And so they are bound by these policies. And so you have folks who sit on these foundation boards, and they pretty much do the same thing that they do every single year. They fund the same organizations that they fund every single year. And it's hard, as Veronica was just alluding to get them to stretch. Sometimes they don't do capital campaigns. Sometimes they don't do programmatic. The barrier to entry to some smaller nonprofits is tough because number one, a lot of times they don't have the resources to fill out such a massive application, and don't have the kind of the backing and or pilot funding. And so these foundations say, well, how do we know this is going to be successful? And so those are hurdles and barriers I feel that foundations need to really look at. A lot of them don't give unrestricted, and so it has to be a specific project. They require you to produce a budget. It's laborious. Now, I'm not saying we should not do the work in philanthropy to apply for grants, but I would have to say that would contribute, John, to what we're seeing of this area being relatively flat.
Yeah.
They say the rainy day funds continue to build. The markets are doing well. The coffers are becoming bigger and bigger every day. What are we going to do with this? Are we going to sunset it and do these large gifts, or are we going to kind of keep piecemealing things? And so, philosophically, I think we need to look at foundations and have conversations around how they are truly making an impact and what we're trying to achieve as an industry.
Right, right. Derek, I think traditional foundations may be a little bit more of a challenge for a K through 12, but your comments.
In my experience, there are only a handful of foundations that really like to give to truly independent schools. So it's not a big source for us, number one. And then I would say for the few foundations we have that are committed to us, we saw giving drop this year. So, for example, we had a foundation that was engaged with us on what I would call a pillar program, and at a large level year over year. And this year they came to us and asked us, to anticipate a cut, and that was based in part because this foundation has spread the peanut butter, as you said, Harvey. There's a number of commitments, and as federal subsidies to some of their areas of impact decreased, they decided to commit more funds there, and so moved away from supporting us at the same level. So,
yeah. Well, and I think the other, of course, the discussion that's been going on for a long time in the federal government is, do we want to up the required distribution from 5% to 10% from foundations? And I seriously think that is gaining more and more traction and may present some interesting times for foundations. But let me move on to that last area, which is corporate growth. And we know that market growth was very strong in 2025, yet giving from corporations was flat at only 0.5% for adjusted for inflation. So I wonder really kind of what's going on with corporations, and we know that a lot of that is pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of other in-kind gifts in there that expand that. But I guess my one question is, putting a cap of 1%, an exclusion cap of 1% on corporate gifts from the One Big Beautiful Bill, if that seems to be affecting corporations, or in general, what are you seeing with true corporate gifts? And I guess I would possibly include corporate foundations in there, as long as they had a direct tie currently to the corporation and weren't kind of spun off. So let me start with Jill on the corporate.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record here too. I think for us, corporate giving has been, we see some ups and downs, not a, an upward trajectory there. So I would say it's pretty flat for us too. So we have changed our focus in working with companies. And we have a team now called Business Engagement. And so rather than strictly focusing on corporate philanthropy, which is what we used to do about 10 years ago, it is really thinking holistically about the relationship of the company with the university. So we are much more now focused on how we engage a company through recruitment of our students and talents. And that's generally one of the ways that a company wants to engage with the university. We have this whole thousands of students who could be employees of their company someday. So a focus on connection to our career center, which actually reports into our division here at UGA. So a great collaborative effort there. And then research, industry sponsored research. This is a big emphasis and priority for our president and provost. And so it gives us different avenues and ways in to corporate relationships that we had not generally, in the past, been leveraging. And so I do think we are seeing some greater engagement there and opportunities to partner with companies outside of just strictly corporate philanthropy, which is what we were used to. So we do have an advantage there to connect and engage with them in other ways. And that's been successful.
Yeah. Harvey, I really want to go to you now because you mentioned the consolidation of the healthcare industry and everything else. So you have some big corporate potential there. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I echo Jill's comments too about corporate giving being relatively flat. But you know what? We should own some of that as professionals. Historically, we've invited corporations to sponsor golfing tournaments and best ball. And we look very much at corporate giving as a transaction. Oh, because they're a customer of ours, they should be giving X. And so they just want to sponsor a whole. We've been leaving a lot on the table with our corporate partners. We don't know their missions, their backgrounds, how much they want to have an impact. And so, we have been blindly sending them transactional pieces of mail and having these transactional conversations when really there are deeper opportunities for partnership and lifelong partnerships, right? So yes, you might be a vendor of ours, and we're not playing quid pro quo at all, but are there goals that your organization and corporations are trying to achieve that we can partner on as well? And that involves philanthropy, then that's fantastic. And so I feel that we've left a lot on the table with corporations, hence the reason why our numbers have been flat. We could do a much better job at partnering with folks who already know us really well if we do our homework and our due diligence to really dive deeper in what their passions are, right? Not to just put your name up on the wall, to sponsor a tournament.
Yeah.
No, it's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And we have a tremendous, John, opportunity with some pretty heavy hitters across the country to partner with us. And we're seeing some big results of that. And they're telling us, they say, Harvey, I don't want to do another golf tournament. I don't want to go to a gala. Save your chicken dinners. What can we do to have an impact on healthcare in this community?
Yeah, that's excellent insight. Thank you, Harvey, for that. Veronica, what about the wise pursuit of corporate gifts?
Yes, I love everything Jill and Harvey said, and we'll just co-sign on all of their comments. And we are trying to respond to this idea of not leaving money on the table and building these better partnerships and this is still in the lab, so we haven't launched it yet, but I'll share it here. We are going to be soon launching a program called Platinum Partners, which we are creating as a pathway for companies that want to get involved in a deeper way with the YMCA by looking at 4 or 5 of our core program pillar areas where the Y really has a history and is making a big impact. So as an example, since the World Cup is in town literally today, the YMCA is the birthplace of youth soccer. Not many people know that, but it actually youth soccer started in this country, started at the Decatur Family YMCA. So not only because of the history, but also because we engage thousands of kids in recreational soccer leagues every year. This is a pillar area that we're going to take to some key corporate partners to say, we're making a difference in people's lives through soccer. We're teaching kids the game of life through soccer. This is the number of kids that are impacted. This is these are the character areas of character development that happen by playing soccer at the Y. Will you be our platinum partner for our soccer program? We're going to do the same thing for early learning, youth achievement, community wellness, and active older adults. And the program will be built to include giving, volunteerism, impact reporting. There could even be some joint marketing related to, we're marketing to your employees as potential members of the Y, you're marketing to our members of the Y with potential business opportunities. So again, it is thinking about it in a very holistic way, but also if companies are willing to come in at a significant 3-year level giving level, then there's an exclusivity that they get as well with some of those benefits. So again, it's in the lab, but it's really just illustrates what both Jill and Harvey were saying about needing to think about partnerships with companies in a new, expanded, deeper way. We're trying to do that.
Great. We'll be anxious to watch and see how that goes, Veronica. Derek, what about corporate? I imagine a little bit challenged K through 12 because the corporations are going to be tied directly to students, parents, grandparents. But your thoughts?
Well, because of that tie, we often get matches. I would probably say that's one of the bigger, impacts we see of corporate funds. And I would agree, it's been relatively flat for us. And then, of course, we do have some touch points too, Harvey. Gala or golf tournament tends to be in our bag of tricks as well. So
very good, very good. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to give each of you just a chance for maybe a final comment. And maybe in that comment, are there other areas of fundraising, creative ways, whether that's in kind, earned income, other type of things that either you're looking at or you see as a trend? And if I could ask you just to make maybe a brief comment about that, and then I'm going to wrap it up. But let me start with Jill.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about big gifts, principal gifts, major gifts, mega gifts. But one area that we are focused on, and I think is really important when we think about donor count and how we're seeing that drop, is a leadership annual giving space. So thinking about donors and gifts in that $1,500 to $10,000. It's not the super small annual gifts. It's not the major gifts yet. We are investing more staff, which is allowing us to recruit new talent into our field because these are generally first-time fundraisers that we are training, and we are seeing tremendous growth in dollars and donors in that space. And so I'm excited about, again, Harvey, what we're building for the future, someone who's going to see those major gifts from that group long beyond when I'm here.
Very good, very good. Derek, your thoughts? On any other creative ways that you're looking at resource development?
Well, I would say for independent schools, one of the things that's on the horizon, I don't know if you want to call it intentional fundraising, but the scholarship granting organizations that are coming together around the new federal school choice tax credit. Mm-hmm. So that, has the potential to impact almost any independent school. We've seen it at the state level. I was familiar with it when I ran a school in Georgia. Georgia had a state level organization. And so that can have a tremendous impact on the lives of children, to whom we want to give high quality education. And it'll be interesting to see how that develops in 2027.
Great, great. Harvey, any thoughts on creative efforts?
Yes, absolutely. So we can't have one discussion, John, without mentioning AI, right? And so will Jill, Veronica, Derek, and will we be replaced by robots? Most likely not. We know what this is a person-to-person business. However, what we are discovering that there are donor patterns, behaviors, patient behaviors, physician behaviors that we know that we can analyze now. And make predictive models of who our future donors potentially could look like and be proactive in that space and cultivating those donors, right? And we can look at the 32-year-old person who has been donating $100 or $200 every year and develop a cultivation strategy around that. So harnessing and leveraging these machine models to really develop the future of what our pipeline could be is something that we're really digging into right now. And that's very exciting work. And then my last thing I would say is that I'm bullish on where we're going. I mean, great, 600 billion is a great number, but I think that we're all in this space of really acknowledging that philanthropy is not this side player. Sure, as a revenue generating source is great, but philanthropy is really a strategic accelerator to an organization. And if we're not paying attention to this, our leaders, our CEOs, and president, we're really missing out on ways that we could just take our organizations to so far levels than where we are right now.
Great. Thank you very much. Veronica, any final thoughts?
It's hard to add much when all the smart people go ahead of you, but I'll just end on this note related to AI, that I think as our sector is now embracing AI and automation, I want to emphasize that meeting donors and prospects in person and giving personalized exposure to the organization's mission is still the best and highest use of a development officer's time. So let's not lose that person-to-person, in-person relationship building as AI continues to take off.
Well, I certainly
That's a
know that
great
each of your organizations and the organizations that you will work with will be blessed by the relationships that they have with each of you as professionals. So I want to thank you very much for participating. And as I wrap up, I do want to reach back and extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Lilya Wagner for helping us understand this year's Giving USA findings, and actually for setting the stage for today's conversation. So thank you again, Lilya. And of course, I want to thank each one of our panelists. What wonderful sharing and wonderful insights and practical insights you had. So thank you so much for that. And I just loved it that we had the view from different sectors. And so that was marvelous. The Giving USA report gives us important data, but as we mentioned here, it's the conversations that help us turn that data into better decisions, stronger relationship, and greater impact. So at Lighthouse Council, we believe that generosity grows where thoughtful leadership and meaningful relationships come together. We hope today's conversation has provided both perspective and practical ideas you can put to work in your own organization. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continued conversations throughout the year. And again, wonderful congratulations to you, my panel. Thank you.